Start at the worst moment. Not the beginning of the world, not the end of it, but the exact seam between the two, where one world is closing over the people who lived in it, and the next one has not opened yet. That is where the Hopi begin this story, and that is where I want to begin it too. A people are trapped underneath. The place they have always lived has turned against them, and above their heads, somewhere in the dark, there is a single opening, and the whole question of whether anyone survives comes down to how you get up through a hole in the sky of a dying world. I am not going to tell you a mystery. I am going to tell you a survival, and I want to tell you who wrote it down, because that is the part that keeps this honest. What you are about to hear was recorded by a man named Henry R. Voth, a missionary who lived among the Hopi, and it was published in 1905 under the title The Traditions of the Hopi. A second recorder, an ethnographer named Jesse Walter Fuchs, wrote down a companion version for the Bureau of American Ethnology a few years earlier. 2 men, 2 notebooks, real dates. Everything I tell you climbs out of those pages. So here is the seam, and I want you to feel exactly where it runs. On one side of it sits the documented fact. There really was a book. There really was a village. There is a real opening in a real canyon that the Hopi point to as the place this happened. On the other side of the seam sits something a ledger cannot touch, which is the story the Hopi themselves tell about who they are and how they came to stand in the world where they stand now. I am going to walk you right up to that seam and point out exactly when we cross it, and I will not pretend the crossing is science. This is how the Hopi say they survived. Here is who wrote it down. Let me stay on the man with the notebook a little longer, because he matters. Henry R. Voth was a Mennonite, born in 1855, and in 1892 he was sent to Arizona to open a mission among the Hopi. He founded that mission at Oribe, on the Third Mesa, and he stayed the better part of a decade. Here is the detail that gives his book its weight. He collected these traditions in the Hopi language, without an interpreter standing between him and the person talking. The work was funded by a man named Stanley McCormick and published by the Field Columbian Museum in 1905, and it runs to more than 100 tales, most of them taken down at Oribe, some at the neighboring villages. And here is something the book itself shows you the moment you open it. The emergence is not in there once, it is in there several times over, told by different men, and Voth printed those versions side by side without forcing them to agree. One telling came from a man at Oribe. Another came from a man at the village of Shupaulavi. That is why, all the way through this, I will keep naming who told which version, because the Hopi never had one official account of how they got here, and the honest thing is to keep each teller attached to his telling rather than blend them into a single smooth voice that never existed. I want to be fair about who Voth was, because reverence means telling the truth about the record and not just the story. He was a missionary. He sat inside Hopi ceremonies and wrote down things that many Hopi then, and many Hopi now, felt were not his to take. The book you can read today is a real primary record, and it is also a record made by an outsider who was not always welcome. Both of those things are true at once, and I would rather you hold them together than pretend the page is neutral. When I read Voth, I am reading a genuine account written by a man the people had reason to distrust. That is the source. I am not here to upgrade it into something cleaner than it is. One more thing before we go under, and it is the most important warning I can give you. If you already carry a version of this story in your head, a tidy sequence of 4 worlds ended in order by fire, then cold, then flood, with neat names for each one, there is a good chance you got it from a book called Book of the Hopi, written by Frank Waters and published in 1963. That book is beautiful, and it is popular, and anthropologists have always handled it with tongs, because it smooths a great many separate voices into one confident narrator. The version I am telling you is older and messier, and less certain of itself, and it comes from Voth and Fuchs, not from the popular retelling. When the older record disagrees with the neat one, I am going with the older record. Now we cross the seam. Everything after this sentence is the tradition, told as the Hopi told it. The people were living below, in a world under this one. In one of the tellings that Voth wrote down, that lower world had been good. It rained all the time, everything grew, and then, slowly, it went wrong, and it went wrong from the top. The chiefs began to do bad things, the rain stopped, and the crops came up small. But the worst part was not the weather, the worst part was the people themselves, because among them were what the Hopi call powaka, sorcerers, the ones the tradition describes as having no single heart, and they multiplied. Neighbors turned on neighbors. Men took the wives of other men. The whole place filled up with the kind of contention that does not settle. I want to keep the ending of that old world short, because the long account of what the worlds before this one were, and exactly why each of them failed, belongs to a different telling. What you need here is only the pressure, the reason to climb. The leaders of the people, the ones still trying to hold a line, looked at what their world had become and made a decision that is almost unbearable in its plainness. They decided to leave it. They would not try to fix the world below. They would walk away from it and find some other place to live, taking with them only the people whose hearts were still, in the tradition's word, single. And that is the moment the story stops being about despair and starts being about method, because you cannot simply decide to leave a world. You have to find the door, and then you have to build the way up to it, and the Hopi account is remarkably specific about both. First, they had to find the opening at all. Nobody down there knew for certain there was a way out. What they had was a sound. Up above them, in the dark ceiling of their world, they had sometimes heard footsteps, as if someone were walking around up there, someone whose world had a floor that was their sky. So the chiefs decided to send a scout, and here the tradition does something I did not expect. It does not send a hero, it sends a bird. In the version an Oribi man named Lomavantiwa gave to Voth, they made a bird called the Motsni, sang over it to bring it to life, and sent it up. It flew as high as it could, and it was too weak, and it came back having found nothing. So they made another one, and this time it was the mockingbird, the Yapa, and the mockingbird was strong. It flew up very high, and it found the opening, and it came back down, and reported to the chiefs that there was a way through. That is the reconnaissance. A small tired bird, then a stronger one, and a door located in the roof of a dying world. Now I told you the record is messier than the popular version, and here is where you can see it with your own eyes. In a second telling, given to Voth by an Oribi man named Yukioma, they do not send 2 birds, they send 4. First a bird called the Pawaokaya, which found a wide empty space up above but no one living in it. Then a hummingbird, then a hawk. And each of them flew up through the opening, circled around, found nobody, got tired, and dropped back exhausted at the chief's feet. Only the 4th bird, the Motsni again, flew far enough to reach the place where Oribi now stands, and there it finally found someone waiting. I will not iron those 2 versions into one. The fact that they disagree about how many birds and which birds is not a flaw in the record. It is what an oral tradition looks like when it is alive and being told by different families in different villages. Voth himself notes, right at the start, that the emergence is told in variant traditions among the Hopi. So when I say the people sent birds up to find the door, know that the Hopi did not hand down a single official script. They handed down a shape, and the shape held even when the details moved. There is a practical detail in here I do not want to skip, because it is pure survival logistics. These scout birds were not found lying around. The chiefs made them, out of clay and song, the way the tradition says nearly everything in that world got made, and sent them up as their own borrowed eyes. And once the mockingbird came back with a confirmed door, the people did not stampede for the exit. The chiefs announced it through a crier. In 4 days, they said, we leave. Let the women prepare food for the journey. On the morning of the 4th day, after everyone had eaten, they were all to gather at the place directly beneath the opening. Even the escape from a dying world, in this account, ran on a schedule and a shared meal. The door is found. Now comes the part I find the most human in the whole account, because it is pure engineering. They know where the opening is. It is far above them. And they have to build something a whole people can climb. So they plant a ladder, and they grow it on purpose. In Lomavantiwa's telling, the chiefs planted a pine tree, a species the Hopi call the kalavi, and they sang around it, and by singing they made it grow fast, straight up toward the opening. It reached, but when they shook it, they found it was not quite strong enough, and its branches were too thin for many people to trust their weight to. So they planted a second kind of pine, the luco, and sang that one up too. This one was stronger in the trunk, but it had a different failure. Its top branches spread out sideways before they reached the opening, so it went wide instead of through. 2 attempts, 2 different ways to fail, and I want you to notice that the tradition is keeping track of engineering the way an engineer would. Too weak, too wide. Then they planted a 3rd thing, and the 3rd thing was a reed. The Hopi call it the bakavi, and you should picture a tall jointed cane rather than a blade of grass. They sang it up like the others, and the reed proved strong, and it grew clean through the opening, the way the first pine had, but sturdier. And then, almost as a footnote, they tried a fourth plant, a sunflower, and the sunflower shot up fast because the ground was wet, but its heavy disc of a head bent downward under its own weight before it ever reached the top, and it was covered in little thorns besides. So the sunflower was out. 4 plants, 2 of them reach, and the reed is the one that carries the story. If you have ever wondered why the reed and the cane sit so deep in Hopi ceremony, this is the tradition's own answer. It is the ladder that held. Here is the seam again, very quietly, because I do not want to slide a miracle past you as if it were a fact. A people singing a cane into the sky is cosmology, not carpentry. I am telling you what the Hopi say, in the shape they say it. The reed grew. Hold that as their sacred account of it, and let us keep climbing, because the next part is about who went up first and why that order matters. Nobody sends a whole people up an untested ladder at once. In the account Voth recorded, the first ones up were not the chiefs and not the strongest young men. The first up were Spider Woman, whom the Hopi call Kokyangwuti, and 2 small figures, a pair of brothers named Pukonghoya and Balungahoya, and the mockingbird that had found the opening. And the reason those 2 brothers went first is the most practical detail in the entire emergence. They are the ones who hold the ladder. The tradition says that once they were through the opening, one brother wrapped his arms around the pine, and the other brother wrapped his arms around the reed, and they held on, so that the trees would not shake while the people climbed. That is the whole job. 2 small brothers at the top of the world, bracing a cane and a pine with their bodies so that the ladder stays steady under everyone who comes after. In the wider Hopi tradition, these 2 are the little war twins, the grandsons of Spider Woman, and here they are doing the least glamorous and most necessary thing in the story, which is keeping the ladder still. And Spider Woman is there watching, and the mockingbird is there singing, and the mockingbird's singing is not decoration. As each person comes up out of the opening, the mockingbird gives them who they are. It sits by the hole, and it assigns each emerging person a people and a language. To this one it says, "You shall be Hopi, and this is the tongue you will speak. To the next, you shall be Navajo. To another, you shall be Apache, or Paiute, or one of the peoples of the Pueblos," and on and on. The songs the mockingbird sings while it does this, Voth was told, are the same songs still chanted in a Hopi ceremony called Wuwuchim. So the sorting of humanity into its peoples, in this account, happens one person at a time, at the lip of a hole, sung into place by a bird. And there was an order to who climbed, at least in the version Ukioma told. After the scouts, the first people up the reed were the keepers of the ceremonies. The village chief went first, and behind him came the leaders of the societies, the flute chief, and the horn chief, and the agave chief, and the rest, each man carrying up the office he had held in the world below. The ordinary people climbed up behind their priests. Think about what that says about the plan. Whatever else got left in the dying world, the ceremonies were carried up the reed by hand, in order, so that the new world would have them from its very first day. Sit with what that means for a second, because it is a genuinely different idea about human difference than most of us carry. In this telling, the peoples of the earth are not strangers who never met. They are one crowd that came up through one opening on one ladder, and got their separate names at the very top, in the order they climbed. That is the reveal I did not want you to miss. Now, the ladder does not stay up forever, and this is where the survival turns hard, because not everyone gets to come. The mockingbird kept singing and assigning, but the people kept coming, and there were so many of them, and at some point in Lomavantiwa's telling, the mockingbird simply ran out of songs. It called out that its songs were gone, and the moment the songs stopped, the people who were still on the ladders began to slide back down into the world below. A great many had already come out. An equally large number, the tradition says plainly, were still down there, and they stayed down there. In Ukioma's version, it is not the songs that fail. It is a decision. The village chief, standing up top, looked down and saw the crowd surging toward the trees, and he understood that among all those climbing bodies were the sorcerers, the Powaka, the very people they had climbed to get away from. So he called down for everyone to stop, and then he did the hardest thing in the story. He pulled up the reed, he pulled up the ladder while people were still on it, and they fell back. because the alternative was to let the sickness of the world below climb up into the new one behind them. I won't soften that, because the Hopi did not soften it. The escape has a cutoff, and the cutoff leaves people behind on purpose, and some of the ones left behind were family. This is not a triumphant exit. It is a rescue with a closing door, and the people who made it out stood there in a strange dark place, knowing exactly how many did not. They gathered at the rim of the opening, and that opening got a name, and the name is the one you may already know. They called it the sepapu. In the record Voth wrote down, the sentence is simple. The people who had emerged remained around the sepapu, as the opening was, and has ever since been called. If you're new here and enjoying this kind of historical depth, subscribe so you don't miss the next one. And here, right at the rim, in the first hours of the New World, the thing they were fleeing catches up with them anyway, and the story earns its darkness. Because a sorcerer did get through. For all the pulling up of ladders, at least one Powaka came out with the good people, and they found out the way you always find out. The village chief's child, a half-grown boy, took sick and died. There was no sun yet, remember. It was dark and it was cold, and they had just climbed out of the ground into that, and now the chief's own son was dead, and the chief was certain that a sorcerer had come up among them and brought the death with him. So he tested for the witch. He took fine cornmeal and rolled it into a ball and threw it high into the air, and he told the people that whoever the ball landed on was the guilty one. He threw it up, everyone watching, and it came down and shattered on someone's head. In Lomavantiwa's telling, it landed on the chief's own nephew. In Yukioma's telling, it landed on a young woman. The record cannot decide, and again I am going to let it not decide, because a young man in one village and a young woman in another is exactly the kind of difference that survives when a story is carried in the mouth for generations. The chief grabbed the guilty one and started to carry them to the sepapu to throw them back down into the world below, which was the only punishment that fit. And the sorcerer said, "Wait, wait, and look down the hole before you throw me in." And the chief looked down through the sepapu, down into the world he had just escaped, and there, running around with the other children, alive, was his dead son, still wet from the washing the Hopi give the dead, alive, down there, in the world of the departed. And the sorcerer said, "That is how it will be now. When someone dies, they go down there. They are not gone. They go back to the world you came from, and they live." This is the moment, in the Hopi account, that death itself is defined for the people, on their first cold night in the New World, over the body of a chief's son, spoken by the very sorcerer who caused it. In one version, she promises that the dead will stay below only 4 days, and then return to their people. That is not a footnote to the survival story. That is the survival story admitting that death climbed up the ladder with them and cut a deal, and that the deal is the shape of what the Hopi still believe about where their dead go. I have to stop and mark this one, because it is easy to rush past. The people did not defeat the darkness of the old world. They carried a piece of it up the reed, and the first thing that piece of darkness did was teach them how dying works. That is a far stranger and far braver story than the tidy one where the good people simply escaped the bad. The Hopi kept the harder version. Now, they are out, and it is still dark, and here the account turns from escape to construction, because the world they climbed into is not finished. There is no sun. There is barely any light. It is cold enough that people are freezing, and the survival stops being about climbing and starts being about building the sky itself. So they made the light by hand. In the account Voth recorded, the chiefs took a piece of dressed buffalo hide, cut it into a disc, stretched it over a wooden ring, and painted it white. They drew a face on it. They attached it to a stick, laid it on a spread of white cloth, set a person to stand on it, and then took the corners of the cloth and swung it, and flung the whole thing up into the eastern sky. And it rose, and it gave light, and it was the moon. But the moon's light was dim, and the people working in the fields still could not see well enough, and it was still cold. So they did it again, and better. They judged the buffalo hide itself to be part of the problem, too cold a material to make a real light from, so they set it aside. They cut a second disc, this time from native cloth, and they dressed it far more carefully, a painted face. A ring of corn husks worked in a zigzag around it, so secret in the making, the teller told Voth, that the Hopi will not let it be watched. Red horsehair, eagle tail feathers, an abalone shell fixed to the forehead to throw light. They laid this one on the white cloth too, set a man to stand on it, and swung it up into the east the same way, and this one rose warm. This one was the sun, and the moment it cleared the horizon the people felt the heat of it on their skin, and the new world finally had a day. I want you to notice the verbs, because this is the Hopi survival mind at its clearest. They did not wait for a sun. They did not pray one into being from a distance. They built one, out of hide and cloth and shell and feather, and threw it into the sky, and it caught. The making of the world, in this tradition, is labor. It is people with their hands full, solving the problem of cold the way you would solve any problem, by building the thing you lack. And they were not alone up there, which brings us to the one they met. Long before the crowd came up, in Yukioma's telling, that fourth bird had already flown to the place where Oribe now stands, and found someone sitting there in the dark, head bowed. When the survivors finally arrived, they came to know him. His name is Masawu, the being the Hopi call skeleton, and he is the one who already owned this world. The messenger who first reached him found a strange figure, a handsome man wearing 4 strands of turquoise and heavy turquoise pendants, with 2 black lines painted down from his nose across his cheeks, and standing beside him a second face, a mask, ugly, with great open eye holes and a wide mouth. This is Masawu, and in the wider tradition he is the keeper of this world and the lord of death and fire, the guardian who was set over the fourth world. And the astonishing thing about him, the thing the account keeps returning to, is that he is poor. He lives, he tells them, in poverty. He has almost nothing. He keeps a small field, and he keeps a fire burning all the way around that field so the ground stays warm enough to grow food in the cold and the dark. And he feeds the messenger from a crop that is never quite gone no matter how small it looks. And when the people ask if they can live here, Masawu does not promise them wealth. He says, "This is how I live, in poverty, with almost nothing. And if you are willing to live that way too, with me, then you are welcome. Come and share this hard life." Read that again, and you understand something central about the Hopi. The being who owns the world they climbed into offers them a hard and honest life, plainly labeled as hard, and they accept it with open eyes. The guardian of the world greets the survivors by warming a patch of ground with fire so a few plants will grow, and by telling them the truth about how thin the living is going to be. That is the welcome. When they came to his field, they learned the one technique that kept anyone alive in that cold new world, which was fire. Masawu kept a fire burning all the way around his planting, so the ground itself stayed warm, and the crops would come up in a place that still had barely any sun. When the people first saw how small his field was, they thought it could not possibly feed a crowd, but the tradition says his food was never gone. He always planted, and there was always something to eat, so the people did exactly what he did. They made their own fields, and they kept fires burning beside them to warm the earth, and that is how they raised the first crops in the world above. He fed them roasting ears and squashes and melons off his own small ground, while their plants were still coming up. Masawu gives them the land, and he gives it to them along with a way of life that is deliberately humble, deliberately hard, and deliberately honest about being hard. And then, before they scatter across that land, comes the choosing, and the choosing is the tradition telling you, in a single image, who the Hopi decided to be. In Yukioma's account, before the people split up to go their separate ways, the chief laid out on the ground a great many ears of corn of different lengths, corn they had carried up with them from the world below, and he said, choose your ear before you start. And there was a scramble, because everyone could see that some ears were long and full and some were short, and the long ears looked like the better life. The other peoples grabbed for the long ears and got them. The Navajo, the Ute, the Apache, in the telling, took the longest corn. And what was left, the short ear, the little one nobody fought for, went to the Hopi. And the Hopi chief picked up that short ear and gave thanks for it. He said, "Thank you for leaving this one for me. This is what we will live on." He took the humble ear on purpose and treated it as the gift, and in the tradition that short ear is the true corn, the one that actually feeds you, while the long ears the others carried away turn out to be little more than grass seed. I want to handle this carefully, because it is easy to hear it as a story that puts other people's down, and that is not the reverent reading. The reverent reading is that this is the Hopi explaining, to themselves and their children, why they chose the small and hard thing over the big and easy one, and why they are proud of it. In the story, humility is something they reached for on their own. They took the short ear and said thank you. That choice is the whole spine of everything I have told you. A people who pulled up their own ladder rather than carry the sickness of the world they left, who built their own sun rather than wait for one, who were welcomed into poverty by the guardian of the world and said yes, and who then, offered a table full of corn, reached for the smallest ear on purpose. The survival and the humility are the same act. After the choosing, the people scattered, and this is where the second recorder, Fuchs, picks up the thread. Each party took its own route across the new world. In the account, an elder brother went ahead toward the sunrise, with an agreement that he would touch the sun and settle where it rises, and that if the Hopi ever fell back into the trouble of the old world, he would return. Each group carried a piece of a marked stone, broken so that the pieces would fit back together as proof when that brother came home. And every party took an elder along, a grandmother, so that no group walked out into the new world without someone old enough to carry the ceremonies and hold the memory. This is the tradition the Hopi call the return of the elder brother, and I mention it only lightly here, because the long story of the wanderings is its own telling. What Fuchs wrote down, for the Bureau of American Ethnology, was that side of it. The clans moving up from the south, from a place the Hopi call Palatquabi, and along the Little Colorado, each clan carrying its own piece of the story toward the mesas where the Hopi live now. Two ethnographers then, working a few years apart, one recording the climb out of the world below, and one recording the long walk that followed, and their accounts lean against each other like the two pieces of that marked stone. And there is a small corroboration buried in Fuchs that I find quietly convincing. In his notebook too, the clans are described as emerging from the world below through a sepapu, an opening, and in one of the tales he wrote down, that same little war god, one of the two brothers who held the ladder in Voth's version, shoots an arrow to mark the exact spot where the people were coming up. Two outsiders, taking down different families in different years, and the same small figures keep turning up at the same opening. I want to be careful about what that shows, because it is not the same thing as proof. The tradition being told the same way by different families, years apart, tells you it was old and shared and steady long before either man arrived with a notebook to write it down. Now we cross back over the seam, out of the tradition and into the daylight, where I can show you receipts, because this is the part that surprises people. The sepapu is a real place, not a metaphor, not a location that got lost. For many Hopi clans, the exact spot where the people came up is a dome of rock in the Grand Canyon, built up over ages by the minerals of a spring, sitting on the bank of the Little Colorado River, a few miles upstream from where it joins the Colorado. You can find it on a map. It is a real, round, mineral dome with water bubbling in a hole at its top, and it is sacred enough that it is not a place outsiders are meant to wander into. The door in this story has a street address. And Oribe, the village where Voth sat and took all this down, is real too, and old past easy belief. Old Oribe on the third mesa has been continuously lived in since somewhere around the year 1100, with documented occupation reaching back more than 8.5 centuries. It is among the oldest continuously inhabited settlements on the entire continent. The people telling Voth how their ancestors climbed out of the world below were telling him from inside a village that had already stood for the better part of 1,000 years. And here is the detail that closes the circle for me. In a Hopi kiva, the ceremonial chamber sunk into the ground, there is a small round hole cut into the floor, set a little north of the fire. It is called the sepapu, the same word. It is a small model of the opening the people climbed through, kept in the floor of the room where the ceremonies happen, so that the passage out of the dying world sits underfoot every single time the people gather. They did not put the emergence in a book and close it. They put a copy of the door in the floor and stand over it. Which is why nothing in this story needs a monster or a villain. The thing that threatens it is forgetting, the slow thinning of an oral record when the children are sent away to schools that punish the language, when a tradition that lived in the mouth has to survive a century of being told it is only superstition. Voth's book, for all the complicated reasons it exists, is one of the places this survived being written down. The kiva floor is another. The village that has stood for 900 years is another. The story kept itself alive the way the people in it kept themselves alive, by holding on through a cutoff, by building what it needed, by choosing the hard, humble thing on purpose. That is how the Hopi say they survived the end of the world before this one. Not by being rescued. By climbing a reed they sang into the sky, by holding the ladder steady with the bodies of two small brothers, by pulling that ladder up when the sickness tried to follow, by building a sun out of cloth and shell when they came up into the cold, and by reaching, at the very end, for the smallest ear of corn on the ground and giving thanks for it. Before we close, if these old stories and the people who first wrote them down are what you came for, the final boss tier at $9.99 gets you members-only videos plus your name and upcoming uploads. Boss tier at $4.99 for early access. Link in the description. Thanks for watching to the end. They still stand over the door. That is the part I keep coming back to. The opening is not behind them in the story. It is under the floor, cut fresh into every ceremonial room. A small dark circle a person could almost put a hand through, waiting there in the place where the people gather, so that no one forgets the shape of the world they climbed out of, or the price of the ones who did not make it up the reed.